Hi everyone. It is so nice to see you again. I've met you on the first day and the second day of the virtual summer program, and now we have arrived in the second week and the last but not least, obviously, lecture session of the virtual summer program. It has been a journey, isn't it, everyone? Today we are going to have a quite lengthy agenda. Besides from the lecture, as always, there will be a little icebreaking and question and answer session. You know the drill. But this is the surprise. We are going to officially announce your final task grouping. So you will start finding your friends today from across the Southeast Asian countries and Pakistan. Isn't it exciting? All right, let's jump into our first agenda. But before, I would like to remind you to always be seated comfortably, take up your notes, open your ears and your eyes, in case you need your coffee too. So we are going to have a session with Professor Butters from the University of Colorado. Friends from the community, can we have please the CV of Professor Butters? Or should I just read it? Can the committee help me, please? All right, there you go. So Professor Butters recently got her PhD in linguistics at University of Colorado with the dissertation titled Negation in Four Languages in Indonesia. She is also a spoken many language and have participated or be a researcher in many research projects, mainly negation in language documentation of Sundanese, Hawan, and Gamo. It's a language in Indonesia. And she has been awarded by many awards, such as Beverly Hills Graduate Student Grant Award, CARDS Award, Center to Advance Research and Training in Social Sciences. She has also published many titles. The most recent one is the extension of Tibetan motion verbs, evidential and other semantic extension, holocative existential predication, and many more. These are quite lengthy, so we are currently having the best professor with us today. Are we feeling the luckiest today? So without further ado, let's just welcome. Maybe we can wait for the committee to scroll down. Okay, let's just welcome our speaker today, Professor Butters. Hello, Professor.
Hello, everyone. Thank you.
It's evening right there, right?
Yes, it is. 8 o'clock here.
Yeah, so Professor Butters is going to give us a lecture from Colorado. Am I right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, yeah. I hope that Professor is now ready, and we are going to have the lecture right now. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so welcome everybody to this talk. I'm so honored that you're all here, and it sounds like from many different countries in the world. This is one of the beautiful aspects of the pandemic, that we can join together and share our knowledge and experience even when we're physically all over the world. The topic of my talk is Indigenous people of Chipta Galar. And I will want to start out with acknowledgements. First and foremost, many thanks to this summer program virtual session and the Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia for inviting me to this talk. I think this is a really important topic. There are so many indigenous groups of Indonesia that are not known about, that are not talked about, that are not studied. So this is an excellent platform for us to delve into some of these indigenous knowledge and tradition ways. The second acknowledgement is to Aba Ugi and the Chipta Galar community, the community that I worked with throughout this research. And then finally to the funding that I received. So the first thing I want to note is that my original project in Chiptakalar was not so much about the culture of the area, but more about the language. So I myself, my background is in linguistics, and I was really interested in studying Sundanese and understanding the different dialects of Sundanese. This is a language that's spoken by about 15% of the Indonesian population, but many Sundanese speakers are what they would call half speakers now, especially Sundanese speakers in urban areas like Jakarta, where, especially for millennials and young people, they might not feel so comfortable to use Sundanese, or they might mix a lot of Indonesian as well. But in rural areas, Sundanese is still very much used. There's still large numbers of people who don't speak Indonesian or other languages and rely on Sundanese for their day-to-day lives. And so Chiptakalar for me was an ideal place to study Sundanese, as there was this sort of pure variety in a sense that was not mixing as much with other languages of Indonesia. And so I was really interested in understanding the differences between urban Sundanese and the rural varieties, like those that are spoken in Chiptakalar. And then, as you saw with my CV, I'm very interested in negation. And so that was a key component as well, as was studying the narratives, traditional oral storytelling, and also the songs of Chiptakalar. So just a brief background there, just to show that these were my original reasons for being in this field site. And then, of course, once you end up going into a research site, you end up exploring so many things that you never could have imagined in the first place. So the outline of this talk, we're going to start out with an introduction to Chiptakalar. Where is it? What are some of the basic features of this village? Then we will go on to discussing the code of conduct and some of the indigenous rules and laws associated with cultivating the land. Next, we'll talk about the consequences of defying the indigenous laws. We'll go into the basic mode of governance. So the style of governance in Chiptakalar is quite different from the rest of Indonesia. We'll talk about agricultural practices in great depth. Like many rural areas of Indonesia, you've probably been hearing about in this virtual series, Chiptakalar places a very big emphasis on agricultural ways of life. Okay, so Chiptakalar is one village within what is called Kasepuhan. So Kasepuhan comes from the Sundanese word sepuh, which means old, and it has to do with this collection of areas that follow the ways of the elders or of the ancestors. So there's this real embracing in Kasepuhan of the traditions of people who came before the people that live there. And this community is located in and around Taman Nasional Gunung Halaman Salak National Park, which is kind of stretching across the borders of West Java, of Banten, and of the general Jakarta area. So if you see this map here, this is the tip of Java. And so this is an area that's really quite remote. There are some roads that are passable by motorbike. It's pretty tricky to get there by car. It's about 2 hours motorbike drive from the nearest town. And so people there oftentimes don't really leave the village very often. And so in many ways, it's a little bit more isolated than some other places in Indonesia. And this is especially the case during the rainy season, when all the mud makes it really, really difficult to pass through those roads. So there are 3 different villages of Kasepuhan, as I mentioned. The first is Resmi, Chiptamulia, and the third is Chiptakalar. So I spent some time in all 3 of these villages, but my major focus was in Chiptakalar. So the whole area of Kasepuhan has around 5,300 people spread out into different villages and hamlets. And according to the oral history that is still recited by people in Kasepuhan today, The people that live there now are descendants of the Pakuan Pajajaran kingdom, and this was a major kingdom in West Java several hundred years ago that was displaced when Javanese power took over from the east. So once the Sundanese kingdom lost their power, they moved into the mountains. And there's documentation of each of these moves. The first move was thought to occur about 634 years ago. And that took place from Jasinga, the origin of the Kasapuhan people, to Bogor, which is a major West Java city today, but at that time was a small town that was part of this larger kingdom. And so the Kasapuhan people today remain semi-nomadic. And what I mean by that is that every so once in a while, they will pick up everything and they'll move to a totally different area. They've lived in the general area where they are now in those mountains since the 1300s, but they shift villages every 15 to 20 years. And to tell you a little bit about the basic livelihood, people in Kasapuhan rely on dry rice cultivation, which is called huma, and wet rice cultivation, which is called sawah. And so many Indonesian peoples use both of these types of cultivation, but it's a little bit more common to have reliance on the sawah, the wet rice cultivation. Other aspects that make Kasapuhan unique is their very close relationship with nature. And this is something that is at the heart of almost all Indigenous groups whenever you look at Indigenous groups that survive across the world. Much of the belief system of Kasapuan people encourages eco-friendly farming practices and ensures a balance with nature through traditional wisdom that has been passed down from generation to generation. And a lot of that wisdom is in the form of jobs, which have been passed down from father to son, to son, to son, to son, to son, from mother to daughter, to daughter, to daughter, to daughter. And so there's this real excellent preservation of this way of life. So Kasapuhan is led by a traditional leader, which is called the Abah, which means father in Sundanese. And this is the current Abah here. His name is Abah Ugi, and his followers are referred to as the Inchu Putu. And the Abah has absolute power in Chipta Galar. So each different village is going to have their own Abah. So I mentioned that there's those 3 different villages of Kasapuhan. This is one of the Abahs, and then there's 2 other Abahs. And all of the Abahs are related to one another. They're from the same bloodline going all the way back to the 1300s. And so, as I mentioned, the Abah has absolute control over what goes on in the village. And he's really going to be the one that's going to be making important decisions, such as when to move, when to harvest, when to plant. Anything that's going on within the community is ultimately his say. Another interesting component about Chipta Galar and other villages in Kasapuhan is the existence of the Imah Gede, which means big house in Sundanese. And it's a traditional house where the Abah lives, but the house also belongs to the community. And so almost every night, people all gather together in the house. The women tend to gather in the kitchen. The men tend to gather in the sort of living room next to it. And people talk, people share stories, people ask advice. And in the Imah Gede, you can also visit Abah, and you can ask his blessing or ask for some kind of advice about a problem that you have in your personal life. So this is actually quite similar to many kingships in other countries of the world throughout history. One really important power that Abah possesses is called Wangsit. Now, Wangsit is an indigenous system of divination, so a way of understanding the future, a way of understanding more supernatural elements of life. And this is usually done through dreams. And so if there's an important decision that Abba needs to make for his community, he goes to sleep, he has a dream, and he may receive a message from the ancestors, which are called the Paraluluhur. And those ancestors might give him some kind of advice as to what he should do going forward. So that brings me to a discussion of the religious conception of Cipta Gelar and Kesepuhan more broadly. So Indonesia recognizes 6 religions officially. That is Islam, Protestantism, Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism. I think I got all of them. And so this is the official recognition of those religions. But in Indonesia, there exist many other belief systems that are more closely related to animism and a belief in the spiritual quality of nature, of objects, of animals. And so Kesepuhan is one community that really embraces this more animistic belief tradition. But at the same time, the official religion on paper in Kesepuhan is Islam. And if you're in Kesepuhan, you'll hear the call to prayer from the mosque. You'll see people wearing Islamic clothing. But at the same time, there's other traditional religious rules. For example, women are required to wear the sarong. You never see women walking around in Western pants, always the sarong. And men are required to wear a head covering. So it would be very, very bad for a man's hair to show in the imagede, for example. So there's some of these traditions in clothing, in dress, in style that are quite different from the Islamic traditions that you see in the rest of Indonesia. As for the houses, all of the houses there are built in the traditional style, and all of the materials come from the jungle directly. And these are the style of the house that have been the same going way back in history. So again, the ancestors are passing down this knowledge from person to person. And so the houses are made of woven bamboo walls, palm fiber roof. And there's a system of gotong royong, which is common throughout Indonesia. It essentially means helping out one another. And so whenever somebody needs a house built, it's understood that the entire community is going to help to build that house. And there's no payment. It's just an expectation that you're going to help out your neighbors. As for the hearth, the place for cooking, there's also a requirement within Kesepuhan that all cooking is done with firewood. So cooking gas is completely forbidden within the community, though there have been some changes in more urban-facing areas of Kesepuhan, where you might have government officials who have been posted in that area who might be using cooking gas. But for the most part, people are using firewood. Here's a picture I wanted to show you. This is a little bit on the outskirts of the Kesepuhan area. So here you can notice that you still have this traditional building material, but it's been painted. The painting is not traditional. And it also has some of these concrete elements mixed in with the rocks. And so there's this sort of interesting fusion that's happening in some areas where you have these traditional techniques blended in with more modern techniques. So one thing that's very important in Kesepuhan, as I mentioned, is agriculture. And the earth is something that's really, really seen to be heavily important. And this is called tanah in Indonesian and in Sundanese. And there's this conception that the land is to be worked, but it's not necessarily to be owned. And so people are very careful about how they take care of the earth, but there's no private land ownership. And Kusnaka Ademiharja in 1989 talked about the reference in Kesepuhan to what is called pancer pengawinan. And pancer comes from the word meaning origin, and pengawinan comes from the word ngawin, which refers to those who are carrying spears in a wedding ceremony. And so this is a symbolic way of speaking of Kesepuhan, as having this wedding ceremony, which is basically a union between humanity and the earth that birthed us. So there's this idea that the earth is a mother. Again, this is a traditional belief system that we see in many different indigenous societies around the world. And therefore, the earth has to be taken care of. One way that the earth is taken care of is through laws around cultivation. And so in Kasepuhan, there are 3 different types of jungle or of land types that can be cultivated. So luwang is the Sundanese word for forest, and luwang tutupan means closed forest. So any of the closed forest is forbidden. And you might ask, what is the consequence of farming in the forbidden forest? Well, it's thought that there are evil spirits, and that if you do farm in that area, there will be some kind of dire consequence. So perhaps you will suddenly die, or your family will suddenly become sick, or you will suffer a terrible drought and your crops will not yield that year. So there's a wide understanding within this area that you do not touch the luwang tutupan. The next one I want to talk about is the third one, the luwang garapan. That's the workable forest. So that's the green light forest where it's okay to farm. It's completely open. Everyone can use it. And then the third, which is the second on my list, is the luwang titipan, which means saved forest. So that forest can be used in special circumstances. So if, for example, the luwang garapan is completely farmed and there's no more lush vegetation to be used, or the earth is no longer fertile, then people can start to use the luwang titipan. Now, whenever people make those kind of decisions, they have to consult the abah. So it's not allowed for a farmer to go to the luwang garapan, see that it's no longer fertile, and automatically move to the luwang titipan. There is a way that he has to consult first with abah. Abah has to consult wangsit, and only then can he use that land. And so there's been some interesting and sad news stories in the past couple of years. And this really reflects, in my view, the importance that the Kasepuhan community still has for these traditional farming techniques, the traditional building techniques. And so in 2018, there was a story about a very bad landslide in Kampung Cigarengong, which is very close by to Kasepuhan. And during that landslide, 3 houses from the 33 were buried, but many houses were damaged as well. And 33 people were buried, 32 killed, and 1 person was lost. And so this landslide highlighted for the people in Kasepuhan the importance of the traditional agricultural techniques, because it turned out that this community that suffered this landslide had been farming in a different way than the Kasepuhan tradition. And so it was believed in Kasepuhan that the reason that this village suffered this consequence was because they had angered the earth. They had broken these natural laws. And so it was interesting to hear the way that people reacted to this news story, which just happened a few years ago. And in fact, in one case, there was a woman in Kasepuhan who went to this site after this terrible landslide. And when she was there, she had this vision of this goddess, Dewi Shri, a goddess of agriculture. And the goddess visited her and spoke to her in a language she didn't recognize at first, and told her that this is what would happen if her community started to farm in ways that were different from the traditions of the ancestors. So this woman went back to her community and she spoke in this language fluently that she had gotten from this goddess. And so she would speak and then she would translate to her community. And this was an excellent way of showing this importance that people have for their agricultural techniques. And Abba Asep, who is the leader of Sirna Resmi, he summed it up by saying, If people damage nature, nature has its own way of balancing itself out. And if that happens, it means that humankind itself will be what will be damaged. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move into a discussion of governance now. So we've gotten through the introduction of Kasepuhan. So you know already that Kasepuhan is led by the Aba. Aba also has a number of staff members under his lead. So he's got expert staff in religion and state affairs, which are called the Garis Functional. He's also got representatives, and here there are three different types: Kolot Limbur, Dukun, and Penghulu. So the Kolot Limbur represent Aba and the Inchuputu, which again are his followers in each different area. They manage Aba's land, and they're sort of like a Kepala Dusun in the Indonesian governance system, which is basically a village head. And they are appointed directly by Aba, but they have the popularity of the people. So the Kolot Limbur are the only ones where their popularity affects whether they're chosen or not. All of the other staff, it's passed down by bloodline. Next is the Dukun. A Dukun is, I guess the best English translation is sort of like a witch doctor or a medicine man, someone who has the ability to heal, usually based on some kind of supernatural power. And so the Dukun in Kasepuhan takes care of humans and animals. There's also a midwife Dukun that helps with giving birth to babies. And then this is an inherited position. So the midwife, she would do it because her mother did it, and her mother before that did it, and her mother before that, going way back to those 1300s. And then the last here is the Penghulu, which is involved in all things supernatural. So this is the person who's most connected to the mystic supernatural world. And they're the ones who lead prayers in traditional ceremonies. And again, this is an inherited position through bloodline. So to summarize, the Kolot Limbur is appointed by Aba, but has the will of the people. So the popularity of that person has some bearing as to whether they'll be selected or not. Whereas the Dukun and the Penghulu are entirely inherited positions based on bloodline. So here is a picture of a meeting of Kolot Limbur. So these are different leaders from different small parts of the village of this entire area. So once or twice a year, they will all gather together at the Ima Gede, which is pictured here, and discuss some of the issues in their communities, maybe the yield of the crops that year, water issues, anything else that might arise. And notice all men. So Kolot Limbur has to be men. So other important functions that are managed by staff are divided in Sundanese into Sara, Negara, and Jung Mokaha. So Sara has to do with any of the religious or mystical matters. Mokaha has to do with ritual matters. Negara has to do with the worldly matters. So anything connected with Negara is a connection between Kasepuhan and the rest of Indonesia, or between Kasepuhan and the rest of the world. So in Kasepuhan, there's this belief as well that humankind originated in West Java. And so even for me as a foreigner going into Kasepuhan, I'm greeted as a daughter or a sister, and people consider me having come back from America and returned to my place of birth in a sense. And so Kasepuhan community is really concerned and interested in having this bridge between themselves and the outside world and sharing their knowledge as well. Here's a chart from Ekawati's work in 2008. And this breaks down some of what we've been talking about. So here you've got the Aba at the head, You've got the Sara staff, which is involved in religious matters. Nagara staff is over here, involved in worldly matters. The Kolot Lumbur, the head of the villages. And then you have the Dukun, the Manusia, for humans and for animals. And then down here, we have all of these different tukang, or sort of craftsmen, or people who are in charge of different tasks around the village. And so I'll go ahead and break down what each of these are. So the tukang moro is in charge of hunting. So the main task is once a year when there's a Serentown ceremony, which is sort of like the Christmas of Chiptagalar. It's the biggest ceremony of the year. We'll talk about more in a moment. That person's in charge of hunting deer for that occasion, and then also killing any wild boar, wild pigs that are disturbing the community. The Tukang Paraji is in charge of helping the midwife with childbirth. She also takes care of circumcision and bridal makeup. Tukang Bersi, this person cleans Abba's house and yard and coordinates the cleaning-wide efforts that take place a couple of times a year. Tukang Sugu helps with building the traditional houses. These are the houses around Abba's complex. The Tukang Bintang constructs roads and fences. Tukang Kamit is the night guard who reports directly to Abba and also takes care of Abba's hearth by gathering the firewood. And the Tukang Goa is the representative and helper of Ambu, Abba's wife, especially in retrieving rice. And then the last one is the Tukang Sisiuk, which prepares community meals anytime that there's a party, perhaps a birthday celebration or some smaller agricultural ceremony, or if there are guests in Abba's house. So the government system is quite complex, and all of these different tasks are passed down by bloodline as well. So if I'm a Tukang Paraji, for example, that means my mother was before me, my grandmother before me, my great-grandmother, all the way back. Oh, I missed one. And the Tukang Kanoli is the last, which is in charge of cooking and reports to Abba's wife. And so each of these tukang, each of these workers have a son or a daughter that assists. And so that son or daughter is basically an apprentice to learning this task. And then when they grow older, they take over that task. And all of these tukang jobs are unpaid. It's just expected that people will do that as part of their responsibility within the community. Okay, so let's move on from governance and go into agriculture. So the most important agricultural aspect of Chiptagalar is the planting of the rice. I cannot overstate how important rice is to this community. And in Chiptagalar, they recognize more than 100 species of paddy, but they plant around 50 of those. And what's unique about Chiptagalar and other Kasapuhan villages is that they only plant once a year. So most places in Indonesia plant around 3 times a year in order to get maximum yield out of the earth. But in Chiptagalar, there is this respect of Ibu Bumi, Mother Earth. And the idea is that a human would not give birth more than once in the same year. So how can we expect the earth to give birth more than once in the same year? So here we see this anthropomorphizing, or this giving of human qualities to the earth as a living being. And so again, this goes against the modern, quote unquote, sense of planting 3 times a year in order to get intensified production. And here is a Sundanese quote, or a Sundanese saying that's often said, which translates as, full belly, new clothes, sturdy house, wife who can produce children. So those are the things that Sundanese value within this community. You need to have enough to eat. If you have new clothes when you need them, if you have a sturdy house that gives you shelter, and a wife who is able to produce offspring, then you should already be satisfied, and there's no need to intensify production and have more than what you deserve. So before the rice planting occurs, there are very important rituals that are conducted around the year. And the reason for that is that permission has to be asked from the earth, because anytime that the earth is planted, it's conceived of as a type of pollution. So in other words, you're saying, I'm so sorry, I know that I'm about to pollute you by putting seeds in. So I'm sorry first, and then you're allowed to go ahead and plant. Now, some of those agricultural decisions are based on reading the stars. And this is another aspect of Kasepuhan that really stands out amongst indigenous traditions of Indonesia. And so there's two different types of star clusters that are looked upon when consulting the stars. And this is something, again, that only Abah does. So Abah is going to look for what is called a Kirti and a Kidang. And these are two different constellations. The Kirti is a cluster, and then the Kidang is a constellation that looks like a kite. And these are important signals as to the agricultural cycle. So if Abba sees a Kirti, this means that the farmers should begin to prepare their equipment, their hoes, their machetes, and any other tools that are needed. And then when the Kidang is seen, that means that the farmers can go ahead and head out to the paddy fields and begin to plow the earth and prepare it for planting. So the looking for these stars, looking for these star clusters is a very important component. Again, something that's been practiced for generations. Another unique aspect of agriculture in Kasepuhan is that there is respect for both the rights of humans and the rights of the pests that eat the crops. And so the agricultural year is divided into two. So September through May is for humans. It's for humans to plant, to tend to their crops. And then May through August is for the pests. And Sundanese say pests and lain-lain. Lain-lain means other things. And what they mean by that is things that cannot be named, spirits of some sort, ghosts, any other part of that supernatural world, which could be conceived of as evil, but the Sundanese in this region believe that they should be given respect. So they're allowed to eat of the crops during those parts of the year. And then during the end of this human part of the planting year, there are certain prayers that are said, and the area is closed off with those prayers. Here's the saying in Sundanese, and it translates to, don't take my stash, don't play around, don't be naughty. So they tell the pests, please just be good. I'm giving you this time. Don't take my food, don't eat my food. So I mentioned that the importance of asking permission for planting. This is done as well through Abba, and he will consult the ancestors through Wangsit in order to understand what dates are ideal for planting. And there's going to be a number of ceremonies done throughout the year. Some of these happen when you're choosing seeds to be planted. During that stage, you burn incense and say prayers. When you sow the seeds, at the moment when the paddy begins to flower. Now, this last one is a very important ceremony called Mapag Parenyiram. And during this ceremony, the paddy is treated like a woman in her 7th month of pregnancy. And so it's customary to eat red and white porridge and conduct a ceremony of celebration. And the reason for this is to encourage the paddy to bear a very high yield of rice. So just like a woman is seen as fertile when she's pregnant, the paddy is also seen as fertile when it is being planted. Another ceremony is done before the harvest. Here, incense is burned, prayers are said, coffee and cake is eaten. And here is a picture of one of the ceremonies. This is during the work part of the ceremony, not the celebrating part of the ceremony. And this is just after the first rice of the year has been harvested. And the men in the community are gathering together the first stalks and placing them into these barrels. And these barrels will be taken to the special barns behind Abba's house. And these are the barns shown here. And these are women, you could think of them as royal women, women in Abba's family, who will be the first women to, or the first people to put the rice into these barns. So as I mentioned, the most important ceremony of the year is Serentown. And this is the moment when the harvested paddy is placed into the loit. The loit are these special barns that are used for storage. And this event happens over 3 days and 3 nights. It's a huge party. People come from all over Kasepuhan and any of the surrounding areas. You also get domestic tourists from around West Java, a few foreigners here and there. And so there's this ritual aspect of the ceremony of the placing of the rice into these barns, but there's also celebrating with traditional puppet shows. There's dancing. There is traditional Sundanese music called angklung, which I'll show you in a moment. And so it's really, really a time to celebrate that the harvest was successful. Here is angklung. This is a instrument that is constructed out of bamboo. And all of these are made by the players themselves. And I'll go ahead and play a clip of this music for you. So the angklung music, just like all of the other tasks that we talked about in the governance section, all of the angklung players and dancers, these are also inherited positions. So this knowledge of how to make the angklung, where to find the perfect material in the forests, all of that is passed down from generation to generation. Here is a shot of men carrying the rice over to the loit during Serentown. And so the rice is carried in a very characteristic swaying motion. It's said that the rice needs to be made to dance in order to celebrate along with people. And I want to say a couple more words about the loit, these barns. These barns are a huge part of life in Chiptakalar. And there's this idea that if we as humans live in a house, then the paddy also needs to have its own house. And so every Kasepuhan village has what is called a loit sijimat, which is the paddy barn that is special to Abba. And then there are also loit adat, which belong to the community as a whole. And this is an example of the loit adat, which is from Sirna Resmi. And then in this traditional loit, every family has to put at least 2 clusters of their harvest in. And so that is sort of like a community safety net. So if there is a family that is suffering, then they can take from that barn instead of from their own barn. And then the last are the loits belonging to individuals. Every single of these barns holds around 400 different clusters of paddy. And again, if needed, one can borrow from the loit adat, and they can pay back the rice the following year with no interest. And so this is a way that the community is able to protect itself. It's able to provide stock in case anything goes wrong. And some of these loit have rice in them that are more than 100 years old. When I was there, we ate rice that was from 1892, and it was perfectly fine. So this is a really, really good storage mechanism for this rice. And it's up on a platform so that pests and other creatures are not able to get in as easily. And it seems to be quite protected. Here the rice is being prepared to be taken to the loit. Here's another shot of the general area of Kasepuhan. It's very, very foggy. And I think this is another reason why there are a lot of supernatural traditions within this area. Sometimes you can't even see the mountains because of the thick fog. And here is a whole line of loit, people bringing the rice over to be placed in this loit. And so the loit as well functions as a dowry in some cases. So it might be given from one family to another in the case of marriage, or it could be inherited. Whenever a family builds a new house, it's important to immediately build a loit. It would be considered an empty house if you didn't also have a loit, because the loit is the home both to the rice and also the home to Dewi Shri, the goddess of agriculture. Another thing about rice that's interesting in this area is that it's forbidden to sell rice in Kasepuhan. So it's completely taboo to treat rice as a commodity that's exchanged for money. The purpose of rice is only to fulfill the needs of the community, not to be profited from. Another consequence of this is when you're in Kasepuhan, if you go to any home, people will immediately provide you rice. Sometimes if you're at different homes throughout the day, you might eat rice 7 times. And this is considered to be a way of welcoming a family member. And again, family members are conceptualized as anybody from anywhere in the world. And so again, with this not selling of the rice, there's this belief that whoever works for the earth and participates in the harvest will not go hungry. And this belief system became very important when I was in Chipta Galar, because I noticed that there was a family that was shunned by the community. And one day I asked some of the community members why that was. And the response was, they do not help with the rice. So again, the rice is considered to be the principal aspect of life in Kasepuhan. So to conclude here, I want to just mention that modernization is happening quickly, like anywhere in the world. We looked at earlier in this lecture at some of the consequences in the minds of people in Kasepuhan of modernization and the mudslide that resulted in one village. But we also have a quick change with the development of roads. The roads are becoming better, which is bringing more people in and enabling people to leave more easily. Installation of electricity. So 20, 25 years ago, there was no electricity in the villages. Now it's widespread. There was a Japanese company that brought in a hydro style of electricity. It's powered by water. And so it is easy to find throughout the community. Still goes out sometime, but there are also generators. Television is somewhat widespread in the community now as well. So in traditional times, people would have gathered and told oral folk tales. Now there are only a few people in the community that can still tell those stories. But now a lot of people will gather around the TV at night, just like many of us elsewhere in the world. There are now cell phone towers. The signal there is actually really good despite it being so remote. And so people have access to media around the world. And in some villages, there is now use of fertilizer. So traditionally, farmers in Kazakhstan have not used any kind of chemical fertilizers. That's beginning to change as well. And also beliefs in some surrounding villages about the number of times a year that it is appropriate to farm. And so that is how I want to conclude. I want to note that change does happen. It is happening. It's impossible to prevent it. But this is a community in Indonesia where people are resisting that change and saying, even though there are these outside influences, we have our ways that we've been practicing since the 1300s, and we will continue to pass on those traditions down from father to son and from mother to daughter. So thank you for your attention, and I would be happy to take questions, but I will turn it over to the moderator first.
All right, let's give a big round of virtual applause for Professor Butters for the lecture that we just had earlier. You can use the clap reaction on the Zoom meeting, or clap your hand like this. Thank you, Professor Butters, for the lecture. But Professor, before we go into the question and answer session, we are going to have a little ice-breaking session with the participants, if you don't mind. Yeah, so before we jump into the question and answer with Professor, as per usual, guys, we are going to have a little question and answer session. Friends from the IA, do we have a share screen today, or do I just, ask the participants about the ice breaking? Please help me. Would you guys please tell me? Will there be a share screen or some such? No? Okay. Thank you. So, because we aim to, to get a little bit closer with everyone, although it is virtual, yes, I'm saying many thank you to Professor. Yeah, before we aim to get closer, even though we are separated around the world, the committee prepared one question for the lucky one that is going to be chosen by me. Please mind me if you got chosen. So the question for today is, what is your guilty pleasure? I'll go first. My guilty pleasure is that I like eating spicy foods and drinking coffee, even though I have problem with my stomach. So I do get a lot of stomachache, but I just can't help with spiciness and coffee. Caffeine is my best friend, honestly. Yeah, same. Everyone is struggling with the same problem with me. Kudos for everyone that is struggling with the same. Please take care of your health, everyone. We are not going to be risking our health in between the pandemic. No. So I'm going to choose the lucky one. Let me see. We will have today Samantha Jane Chris. I hope I pronounce your name right. Samantha, are you here with me?
Yeah.
Hi, Samantha. How are you?
Yeah, hi. I'm sorry. Can I keep my camera off?
Yeah, it's okay. It's perfectly fine. So, in order to get to know you closer, what is your guilty pleasure?
My guilty pleasure. I like to stay up late even though I'm already tired. Like I already feel sleepy, but I'm forcing myself to stay up because I feel like I'm wasting hours of the day. I'd rather
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest problem for us, the online generation. You just keep staring at our phones, at our laptops and screens, right, Samantha? Yeah, thank you for sharing with us today. You're going to have two more people. Let's choose the lucky one.
you.
I will only choose the one that pop up in the chat box. Haha. Wait. Alif Hafizi. Hi, Alif.
Hai, good morning. Selamat pagi semua.
Selamat pagi. Oh, so you're from Malaysia?
Yeah, I'm from Malaysia.
Selamat Hari Merdeka.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Do you guys have some sort like celebration for Independence Day?
Yeah, we usually have we call a perarakan. I don't know what it's in English. Like we have a perarakan in our very national or not historical place like the Sultan Abu Samad Dataran. So we have the perarakan all or like our army like TUDM, the flight army or the place we have a perarakan there, so we can see all of their belonging like the cars and the something their specialties of their what they have in the
like a parade.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I don't think Bandung have something like that here. Yeah. So back to the question, what is your guilty pleasure?
I don't know, but I think okay, I'm on diet, but I'm still eating a cake for 2 slices. Like I can finish 2 or 3 slices of cake. Even I'm not really have to eat that lot. Like okay, I like sweet things.
Yeah.
And
do you
also
have
like
sweet tooth?
I know yeah, like you that I like you mentioned that also you have a gastric, and like me I have a gastric, and also like the spicy food and Nescafe and coffee. I'm very addicted to that 2 things. So I think we are same.
Yeah, same problem. The millennials, no, the Gen Z. I'm sorry. Yeah. So do you have sweet tooth because of that, or is your teeth fine, or any kind of problems regarding to guilty pleasure?
Yeah.
Okay, that's too bad. Thank you for
you.
sharing with us today. One last person, the lucky one. Wait, let me scroll. Let me scroll and choose. Hold on. We are going to have Lê Khao Phan from Vietnam. I suppose I hope I pronounce your name right. Lê Khao Phan, Lee or Lê. Sorry. Are you here with us? Going once, going twice. All right, let's pick another one. Najmi Hasim. Najmi, are you here with us? 4, 5, 6. All right. It seems that Najmi and Calvin is not here with us today. Maybe they are going to the restroom or some sort. Oh, Miko. Hi, Miko. You raised your hand. I remember you.
Yes.
You're the one that sings. Okay, so you wanted to share with us your guilty pleasure.
Yes.
Okay.
I love putting ketchup even on sinigang, even in foods with soups or just anything.
Why is it a guilty pleasure? I'm sorry, I might not catch it.
Ketchup is like the red thing, the red condiments.
And why is it a guilty pleasure?
I don't know. It just really tastes good because everyone. It's not everyone who likes ketchup.
All right. Thank you, Miko, for sharing with us. We also have some people sharing with us in the chat box. My guilty pleasure is spending a lot of time looking for things to buy in Shopee. Same, even though I don't have enough budget. Yes, online shopping is the trend, but it's not so good, honestly, for my, my financial condition. All right, so that's what little love that we are going to have today. Now we are going to have a question and answer session. So you guys know the drill. You can raise your hand. Oh, I'm sorry. We are going to have first 5 people that is going to ask questions. So if there are more than 5 people, we can always have more time, but still we only have 1 hour limit. So the first 5, the first 5 people that is going to ask question can raise your hand using the Zoom meeting feature and unmute yourself when called upon. Sorry, are your phone missing? Yes, it's okay. And you might also type your question in the chat box for me to read aloud for everyone else in the room. So, Professor Bartels, are you ready to ask questions? To answer questions for our participants.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. So please, any of you have any questions? Go ahead. Oh, we already have one. The Lisa. Wait. I need to count. We have the Lisa, Ladeline. Oh, also the committee just shared a link to attendance list for today. So kindly please fill that link out while you are still in the Zoom meeting, because the link will be closed right after the session finishes. So don't forget to fill that out. Okay, we have 4 participants, 5. Okay, that's it. That's the first batch for the question and answer. Today we have Delisa. Hi, Delisa.
Hi, Ariel.
Please, the question directly.
Good evening, Professor Butters, and good morning, everyone. So I am Delisa from the Philippines, and I would like to know what major regulations does the local government of Chiptagular impose within the community, and what consequences or penalties are given when these laws are violated. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your question. So with the violations, whenever there is a violation, it's more that the community will look upon that person very badly. And Chiptagalar is like most places in the world that are small, where gossip travels very quickly. And if someone has done something badly, the entire community knows within 30 minutes. And so basically the person will get shunned by the community. They might get no smiles. People might not invite them to sit with them. So that's the major reaction that you get in most cases. If there is a big violation, maybe there's a husband who's unfaithful to his wife, or maybe there's somebody who is raped, something like that, then usually the matter is discussed with Abba between any of the parties that were involved. And maybe Abba will come up with some kind of solution, such as maybe in the case of rape, this person is punished by doing extra labor, and then the victim, is moved away from that situation. In most cases, it does not go further than that to the Indonesian national government. In fact, I'm aware of several crimes that are fairly serious that were never taken to the next level. And so the society has its own way of sorting out those issues. And most people seem to feel that it's a fairly effective approach.
Okay, does Professor Rogers already answer your question, Delisa?
Yes, Ariel. Thank you, Professor Butters.
All right, thank you for Delisa too. All right, we have the next question from Sarah Aisa. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Ariel. Good morning.
Hi, please.
Professor.
You may.
I'm Sarah from Malaysia. I have 2 questions actually. You said that the tukangs and every job in what we call that in their community is inherited from the mother to the daughter and the daughter, right? What if they don't have children to inherit it with? And secondly, I would like to ask about their health issue. Do they still rely 100% on the dukun, or they now go into the hospital and take some medicines?
Those are great questions. Thank you. So for the first question, if the tukang do not have sons or daughters, usually there is an adopted sort of son or daughter who will take the place. So I know of one case where the tukang who was in charge of cleaning the yard, they did not have any children. But there was a child who they helped to raise, who ended up taking over that position, even though it was not a direct blood relative. In other cases, let's say that I don't have any children, maybe my brother has children, his children could take over that path. But the important thing is whoever the child is that takes over that job, they need to undergo that apprenticeship. So they need to be trained with the tukang for a number of years before they take it over. And as to your second question about the healthcare, so most people still rely on the dukun. There is some people who will go to the city and if there is a big problem. But in most cases, people try to treat those issues through traditional means, through traditional medicine, and through ritual practices as well. But I know of several people who, for example, would go to the city if they needed to get some dental work done. There's no dentistry in Kasapuhan whatsoever. And so if it became very bad, they would usually go to the city.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the next question. Wait, I forgot who will raise their hands first. If I'm not mistaken, we will have first Mary, first goodness. Hi, Maru.
Hi, Ariel. Thank you very much. Good evening, Professor Batters, and thank you very much, Ariel. So thank you for that very wonderful discussion. I am Mary Esquivinas from the Philippines. So, based on experience also, like you have mentioned earlier that the Kasipuhan tribe have a strong relationship or have strong beliefs with supernatural being our spiritual beliefs. And personally here also in our province, we also have that kind of relationship within that sometimes when there was like a typhoon coming on our way, the people here did not believe such thing because they believe that our very own, what they call this, very own saint will protect us against the typhoon, so we don't need to prepare. In such cases, there such things that the spiritual beliefs or the supernatural beliefs of these people contradicts with the scientific facts and scientific basis that coming from the government or coming from those who are in place, such as those typhoon, Professor?
Thank you so much. It's a really interesting question, and that's really cool to hear that there's a similar practice going on in the Philippines. So in many cases, there are things that happen in Chiptagalar that seem to contradict scientific findings. I think one example was the woman who was suddenly able to speak that language that nobody could recognize. And since I'm a linguist, I was very interested in it. And so I was sort of testing her. And so I would point to several different objects and ask her the name of those objects in her language and write it down. And then several weeks later, I would ask her again, and she would say the exact same word. And this is something that she would be speaking fluently, without any pause, without thinking. And so it really baffled me. And it was something that was different from any other languages that I had ever heard in Indonesia or that any of the community members had ever heard. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the explanation for that type of situation? In terms of the agricultural techniques, there are some studies that have been done. Ekawati 2008 was one who looked at the rice production methods. And she found that the style of planting and harvesting the rice only once a year was actually much more effective to the soil long term than harvesting 3 times a year. So this was a case where the Chiptagalar method was actually scientifically more viable than the quote unquote modern method. So there are many cases like that as well.
Thank you very much, Professor. That was like a very interesting answer also about that language. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Maru and Professor. So I remember the first 5% was also Ledlin. Hi, Ledlin. Are you here with us? Hi. So
Hi.
please.
Hello, good evening, Professor Butter, and good day to everyone. I am Lady Joyce from Philippines. So it was mentioned earlier that the roles inside the community are inherited positions. My question is there an instance where the ABA assigned other members to a specific role even if they do not have the blood from someone who have the same position before?
Thank you. Thank you. That's a great question. So for the tukang positions, there is no case that I know of where that has happened. It's possible it's happened in the past before, but there's certainly other types of jobs that are traditionally passed down between bloodlines that the ABA might assign. So for example, there is a job in Chiptagalar to be the host of the guests who come to visit. And traditionally that has been passed down, usually from members of ABBA's own family. But in Chiptagalar today, that position is held by somebody who was actually from outside of the community, who was born in Tasikmalaya, which is in a different city in Java. And so that's a case where there's a newcomer to the community who has gained the trust and the admiration of ABBA, and has been appointed to a position that would historically and traditionally not be for that type of person. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. I was, not looking for the chat box, and I just scrolled up. We have many questions in the chat box, professors. Okay, we are going to go. I just take photos of the questions. We are going to go to the first question in the chat box from Rico Combinino. Hi, Professor Bates. Thank you once again for the very informative discussion. This is Rico Combinino from Leighton Normal University in the Philippines. I've been pondering about these questions. The Rico sent two questions. The first one was, it was discussed earlier that the Serentaun is regarded as the most important celebration in the Chapta community, which is dedicated as a celebration for a successful harvest. Suppose that the harvest season is not as fruitful as they expected it to be, do they still celebrate Serentaun?
Hi, Rico. Thank you so much for that question. So I do not know of any cases in recent times where the harvest has been so bad that they have not celebrated Serentaun. So this is a farming technique that really has been continually successful. And it's something that many people who have studied Chiptagalar find very surprising, because in most areas of Indonesia, there's going to be some seasons when the crops fail. But in Chiptagalar and other Kasepuhan areas, it seems that the crops are generally successful. I think one reason for this is getting back to that nomadic lifestyle. When the community is moving, one reason that they're doing that is because after a certain amount of time, the soil is no longer as fertile as before. And so when they move to a new area, they're ensuring that they are in this new place with rich organic soil that's much more likely to produce good quality crops. And another thing is that in that area, it's very, very rainy. And so they don't have the problem that some other parts of Indonesia, especially Eastern Indonesia, have with droughts during crucial times in the planting season.
All right, thank you, Professor. So this is the second question from Rico. Given that the committee is led and managed by Abah, his staff and his representative, do people of Chiptagalar still participate in national elections of Indonesia?
Yes, so there are many people who do, and there are other people who don't. I would say most people in Chiptagalar are very loyal to their community, but they also consider themselves to be Indonesians. And so they will participate in national matters. They will celebrate Independence Day. I think there's a bit of a generational gap here. So I think for millennials and other people who are younger, they're much more likely to participate in civil life in Indonesia than some of the older generations. And so it just depends on the person. One thing is that it can be a little bit difficult for people to travel in and vote. Again, it's like 2 hours to the nearest village. And so just logistically, it can be quite difficult for people to put in that vote when it comes time for elections.
All right. We are going to have some several questions again from the chat box, because before we go back to the ones that raised their hands, from Nurul Amirah binti Hussein, you mentioned earlier that they are semi-nomadic. What are the reasons for them to move? And how do they know that the land is safe to be occupied? Can I just mention the other question? What are the reasons for those who violate the customs? Oh, this has been answered earlier. So yeah, please, the first question.
Okay, thank you as well, Nurul, for your question. So I know you wrote the question before, but one reason I was just talking about was about the reason of moving for the fertility of the soil, but there can be other reasons as well. So for example, if there's a terrible event that happens in the community that brings a lot of sadness to the community, they might move to a different location where there's not that stain of that event. Other times there might be the idea that there is kind of a bad spiritual air that's kind of penetrated the community. And so people might move for that reason. Or it might just be that Abba has done Wangsit and he's ascertained that something bad could happen in the community. Even if the community is flourishing, maybe they have wonderful crops and maybe everyone's happy. But if Wangsit shows that something's going to go sour quite soon, then people will pick up and move. And then the second part was, how do they know that the land is safe to be occupied? They trust in the Wangsit. So if the Wangsit shows that that new area is going to be safe, then they will trust that. There's not necessarily going to be any scouting before that to check it out. They will just find out through the Wangsit and go there. Now, in most cases, the place they move to is pretty close. It's probably somewhere that people have walked across before in their lives. So we're not talking about major moves here. It might be shifting a couple miles, a few kilometers. And so it's usually areas that people might be sort of generally familiar with.
All right. Thank you, Professor. Next from Kamalia, University Technology Mara. I didn't know if you mentioned this already, but I did not notice. In terms of education for their children, does the community accept formal education from the government or not?
That's a great question as well. These are all wonderful questions. Thank you, everybody. So yes, there is a formal education in the community that is from the Indonesian government. Both the normal education and then also madrasah for Islamic education, though it's not directly in Chiptagalar, it's a little bit outside. A lot of families don't participate in this fully, and then others do. I think for the younger generation right now, it's quite common for pretty much all of the children to go to these schools. But for the older generations, maybe people in their 40s and 50s, there are many people who might have gone to school up through second grade, third grade, and then dropped out at that point to focus on the agricultural pursuits. So this is something that's shifting. It's also becoming a little bit more common for people to send their kids to go to school in Jakarta or Bogor or Sukabumi or another big city where they have relatives. And so the child is raised outside of that community, and then sometimes the kid will come back to that community and live their life in Kasepuhan.
All right, thank you, Professor. Let's move on to Carla from Philippines. You mentioned that they undergo modernization. I wanted to ask if they are using turbine generators or solar panels for the electricity, or is there any kind of mode for the electricity that they use?
Could you repeat the first part of the question, please?
About the modernization, if they were using turbine or generators or solar panels for electricity, or if there is any other modes for the electricity.
Yes, thank you. So the generator is only in Abba's house. And so if there is a power outage, then most of the community will go and gather at the Imah Gede, that big house, and stay there, do any of the necessary charging or whatever of cell phones that everybody likes to do. But it's unable to power the rest of the community. So for the day-to-day powering of the electricity, it's done through water. There is a hydroelectric system down the hills, which is able to churn up the necessary amount of electricity in order to power the entire area. And that's only been there for about 10 years, if I'm not wrong. And unfortunately, from time to time, it does go out. And then there's a crew of people that is assembled, and they usually have to hike down to this area a couple miles away and sort of figure out what's going wrong. And usually by the end of the day, it's up and running again.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Now for LNU, Erica, can women inherit or be appointed to a position in the committee beside from maybe Abah and Tukang Paraji, right? Can women be appointed for the other positions?
So women, it's definitely a patriarchal society. So most of the high positions are held by men. But the Ambu, Abba's wife, also has a major role to play. And I do want to mention while we're on the topic that unfortunately, Abba Ugi's wife just passed away last month. And she was very young as well. So that's extremely saddening for me and for many people in the community. But there are these positions of women in the family, but in most cases, they will be helping with the midwife tasks, makeup type tasks, cooking type tasks. So it's definitely very gendered, and women will be mostly focusing on traditionally feminine tasks.
All right. The last question that I took a picture of. Good morning, Professor. I'm Crystal Jel Chua from Leighton Oman University of the Philippines. I have a question regarding this session. How does Kasapuhan preserve or take care of the Leweng Titipan or safe forest? Does Kasapuhan allow tourists to enter their community, particularly in the three mentioned jungles, namely as Leweng Tutupan, Leweng Titipan, and Leweng Garapan?
So great question. Tourists are allowed in Kasapuhan, but anyone who's coming in for the first time has to visit Abba right away and ask permission to be there. And it's quite intimidating, I can tell you, because Abba just has this air of tremendous respect about him. But in most cases, you'll get permission to stay. But the Leweng Tutupan is completely off limits. And there's stories of people who have gone into that forest who have had bad things happen. Sundanese in that area believe that if you're in the forest and you hear the sound of chickens, it's the sound of an evil spirit that is going to come and kill you. And so there's stories of people who accidentally got lost and wandered into the Leweng Tutupan, and then they suddenly heard the chickens and started running and usually got out fine. But then there's other stories of people who got lost, but nobody's quite sure if those are real stories or if those are stories that mothers and fathers tell their kids to scare them.
All right, Professor Badas. I also experienced the myth, right? It maybe because I'm from Bandung and it is still a big part of Sundanese community. We don't like hearing chickens in the forest. Just no. It is very scary. So before we go back to the chat box, I would like to remind everyone to fill out the attendance list, and don't forget, because it will be closed right away after the Zoom meeting ends. So now we still have quite plenty of time. We have, sure, any of you have more questions, we are going to get back to the one that raised their hand. So if you have a question now, raise your hand. We have first Jehiel have already raised their hand. Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, please, Jehiel.
Good evening, Professor Butters. How are you? I would like to ask you about after you conducted this study, what surprised you the most? And after the second question is, did you change any of you or your family's habits as a result of anything that you learned from this study?
Thank you. Those are great questions. So I think there were just so many things that surprised me about this study. So like I said before, I really did go in focusing on the language, but there were so many aspects of the culture that were so kintal, as Indonesians say, so thick, that I was really, really impressed and excited to see. So I think the adherence to the agricultural traditions was what impressed me and surprised me the most. And the fact that there are so many rituals throughout the year that people continue to practice. I have so many Sundanese friends from urban areas who are not familiar with those traditions. And so there seems to be a lot of people in urban Indonesia that are not aware very much that these kind of practices are continuing to happen in indigenous communities of Indonesia. And so that was really interesting to see firsthand. As for practices that I continue with my family, I think there's a general respect for the earth that continues, and that's impossible to forget once you live in a community like that. And so I'm much more aware and thoughtful about farming practices than I would have been before.
All right.
Thank you,
you. Yeah, I'm guilty of it too, you guys. I do speak Sundanese, but I'm not that fluent. I can say that I'm more fluent in English rather than Sundanese. And it's embarrassing, but I'm using more Sundanese nowadays because I'm meeting more of my friends that speaks fluently in Sundanese. So yeah, let's speak Sundanese. So yes, Jeno. Hi, Jeno.
Yes, hello, good morning, and also
Hi.
good evening to Professor Butters. So I would like to ask if in people in Kasepuhan, how were they able to adapt to these changes, like the ones that you have said a while ago during the modernization time, when they had cell phones, televisions, and something like that?
Thank you. I think for some people, they have adapted better than for other people. There are a number of older people in the community that, I guess, like older people everywhere in the world, that reject those kind of changes and see them as a bad thing. And so there are people who would refuse to watch television, refuse to talk on the phone, maybe even resist electricity for a while, though pretty much everyone has embraced it now. But I think for the most part, people have embraced the changes. I think it's definitely made some of the younger generation a little bit less enthusiastic about living where they do, and maybe have this desire to get out and see the wider world, just like young people everywhere in the world. And so I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's definitely a side effect of modernization, and especially globalization, and the ability to see what's happening on the other side of the world.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
All right. We have a question in chat. Also, if any of you have a question, just please raise your hand. I see Alif, if I'm not mistaken. Wait. I need to scroll up. Alif Hafiz, yes. Selamat pagi from Malaysia. Hi Alif. Hi again, Alif. So there are two questions, Professor. So the first one, as Professor Betson mentioned, that this committee already accept the modernization. And regarding the leader in the community, does any minister or representative from the government will take handle in the leadership there? All people in Ciptagal doesn't accept the representative from the government. And the second one, other than farming the padi, huma, and sawa, did they do plant other fruits like banana or tapioca?
Great. So I will go ahead and answer the second question first. So there are other things that are planted other than paddy. I think banana would probably be one of the biggest ones, and then also different types of tubers like cassava and other types of potatoes, sweet potatoes as well. are very, very popular there. So there's definitely people that engage in gardening other than the planting. One thing that's really hard to get there is fish. So there are plenty of vegetables, but a little bit less meat, mostly chicken, but less fish than you would have in many other places in Indonesia. And then the first question that you were asking, does any minister or representative from the government take handle in the leadership there? For the most part, there is not too much interference in Cipta Gelar, but there's definitely a relationship between Cipta Gelar and the national government of Indonesia. And so the Abah will travel from time to time to Jakarta. I believe he's met with the Indonesian president, Jokowi, as well. And the president is interested as well in preserving these indigenous traditions of Indonesia and in keeping these traditions alive. More recently, there's been a bit of a move to transform Kasepuhan and other rural parts of West Java into more of a tourist type area to bring in more interest and attraction to this area. And so that's another reason why there's been more interaction between Abah and his staff with the outsiders in the government of Indonesia.
All right. Yeah. I was lagging for a little wait. Oh, I'm sorry. So we have John Carlo. Oh, John Carlo raised his hands. Hello, John.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, yes, please the question.
Hello, Miss Ariel. Good evening, Professor Butters. My question is related to what you have mentioned a while ago. You said that the wife of the current Abba now has died last month. My question is he allowed to remarry again? And also, since for the most part the Kasipuhan is, or the Chiptagler community is influenced by Islam. My another question is, are men allowed to marry multiple women, since it's one of the cultures of Islam community?
Thank you. Great questions. So as for the Abba, he is allowed to marry again. I think he was very much in love with his wife, so it might be a while before that happens, but it's certainly permitted. As to your second question about polygamy in Islam, yes, the men in Kasepuhan can marry as many as 4 wives in accordance with Islamic law. It's also fairly common, I would say, in Kasepuhan compared to other parts of Indonesia to have high levels of divorce. So there's definitely been people that I've met that have divorced 11, 12 times. And I think that's a little bit more common in rural areas all over Indonesia, and not just in Kasepuhan. I think it's more of a rural versus urban tendency than anything specific to Kasepuhan.
Thank you, Professor Butters.
Thank you.
I'm very amazed.
Yeah, thank you, John, for the questions too. So we have the last question in the chat box for today's discussion. It has been very flourish. The discussion is so nice. I love seeing here. Yeah. It's from Nurul again. Hi, Nurul. The question is, they seem to be very patriarchal, and also they follow the custom and rules very strictly. So maybe due to the globalization and modernization, do the youngsters in the community bothered by the issue, as they were also now exposed to social media and outside news, or do they practice some sort of, preserving the cultures?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I think like in many patriarchal societies, women find their own ways to have agency and to sort of rebel. And so in Kasepuhan, it's no different. Women, even though their role is a little bit different from that of men in the community, they still hold a lot of influence over the various aspects of the community, whether it's the ceremonies, the festivals. And because it's such a big festival society, the women do have a lot of influence in those areas. But there are definitely women that have spent considerable time outside who might think about their life there a little bit differently. So I've got one woman on mind who lived in Singapore for a while, where she worked as a maid. And when she got back to Kasepuan after having that freedom, it was a little bit difficult for her to integrate back in, having lived a quite different lifestyle before. But I think for most people who do go back to Kasepuhan, they go back because they love it, or they go back because they're very invested in the traditions that are practiced there. So people who leave, but people who come back for a reason. And there's definitely going to be some talk in comparison to other societies around the world that's going to happen anywhere. But for the most part, I would say that most people are pretty devoted to the lifestyle in Kasepuhan.
All right. Thank you, Professor, for the answer. So the last question marked the end of our question and answer session, also the whole session with Professor Butters. So thank you, Professor, for joining us today and sharing the amazing culture of Siptagala. Let's give once again, a big virtual round of, a big round of virtual applause for Professor Butters. Yay. Thank you. I hope, do you plan to visit Indonesia again, Professor?
Yes, I hope to. As soon as things are open again, and I'm hoping the best for Indonesia. I know it's going through a really rough time with COVID, but as soon as things settle down, I would love to come back.
All right. So thank you, Professor. Let's maybe in future chances we are going to meet in better condition and better situation. Thank you very much. I would like to remind all the participants, before we move on to the next agenda, we are going to that you will have to fill out the attendance list, because it will be closed right after this Zoom meeting end. So for the next agenda, we are going to have a grouping. Yeah, we are going to announce the official grouping for the last day presentation that we will have in this virtual summit program. So friends from the committee, can you please help me to share the screen? All right, there you go. The so long awaited groups that you will work with. So the group is also below the group 1, group 2. There are also subtitles regarding what kind of topic that you will have to cover. Group 1, Introduction to Indonesian Culture and Sustainable Community Development and Economist Perspective. Group 2, Indigenous People of Dayak. Group 3, from Hanjali, from Indigenous Food to Community Development. Group 4, Indigenous People of Baduy. Group 5, Indigenous People of Ciptagelar. Very fresh. Group 6, Indigenous Knowledge System. So please take screenshots or some photos before we the discussion is gone. So the committee will also share a link to a WhatsApp group in the main WhatsApp. Wait. The committee will send a list of links for the smaller WhatsApp group, like group 1, group 2, group 3, in the main WhatsApp group that we have for coordination along the summer program. So you can join the rest of your group and also the committee that will assist you throughout the discussion that we will have tomorrow in that very specific group. So yeah, I will give another moment for you guys to take a picture or maybe a screenshot, because I haven't also taken a picture. I need to take off the picture because I will be with group 2. So hi Crystal, Daniel, Genesil, Samantha, Amirul, Nur Athira, Nur Izati, Nur Izaida, Fuduk Thai, and Usama Nasir, you're going to meet me again. Please, let's not be bored with my face. I'm so sorry. I talk so much. Wait. Yep, I have the copy now. All right, let's move on to the next agenda. Wait, I actually forgot. The next agenda that we are going to have today. I'm so sorry, everyone.
All right. May I add something?
Yes, please, Kak.
May I add something? Okay. So, guys, the grouping will be used tomorrow, as tomorrow we will have the group discussion, and tomorrow we will have the group discussion covered the topic covered that you have assigned to each of the group. For example, group 5 will have today's topic, the indigenous people of Ciptagelar, and every group has its own topics. And then after that, and the discussion tomorrow, the result of your discussion will be presented in the date 9 and 10. So later on, for the arrangements of presentation, we will talk about later. But then the thing that you have prepared for now on is for the discussion tomorrow. Later on the WhatsApp group, we will share you the WhatsApp group for each group, as what have Ariel said, and also the full compile of the materials from day 2 topic until today's topic. So we will, in case that you have no time to take notes, so we will prepare you for the materials. Okay, and then once more, Ariel, if I'm mistaken, that we will have 1 minute video, right? So everyone here, everyone who become participants could make 1 minute video of what you have been experienced in our program, in the summer program. You may say that if you are enjoying this program, you may say it in your video, or maybe like any additional feedback for us, that would be nice. So if anyone interested in submitting your 1 minute video, you may upload it in the link that I have shared. Oh my God, sorry, not yet. Yes, here that. But it is due tomorrow midnight, because your 1 minute video will be posted in the end of our summer program. So yes, for those who are interested, so you may upload your video. So if you have any questions, I think Ariel, you can ask us through our license officer or maybe in the WhatsApp group. Thank you very much, Ariel.
Thank you, Kaintan, for adding the information for our participants. So yeah, guys, it's not mandatory, but I do hope to see all of you, having a little soft moment, hearing you guys talking about the future of it would be so nice. So please, yeah, again, I would not be tired to remind every one of you to fill out the attendance list so that the committee can list you on today's attendance. So before we actually end the session, we are going to have a little documentation session as always. So please, so if any of you has no internet connection trouble, some sort of situation that you need to handle right now, please turn on your camera. Professor Badrus, are you still with us? We need to take photos.
Yes.
I want to take. Yeah, hi, Professor.
Hi.
If that's okay, we will wait for those who maybe need to, a little bit catch up, refresh their faces, smile, everyone. If you need to, you can massage your cheek. It's not that bad. Okay. I think my friends from the IA will assist us for the documentation. Is it Lan or someone else? Or Evano?
Hello, everyone.
Oh, Habib, hi. I mentioned all the wrong names.
No, it's okay.
All right.
All right,
Please,
everyone,
Habib.
please turn on your camera because we're going to take a wonderful picture of today's session. All right, okay, there are 3 different slides and I'm gonna take from the first slide. Okay, people in the first slide, please hold on with your pose and give me a sign, everyone. Okay, 3, 2, 1, cheese. Okay, I got it. Okay, the people in the second slide. Okay, 3, 2, 1, cheese. All right. In the third slide, 3, 2, 1, cheese. All right. Okay, one more, everyone. Okay, I'm gonna pass to someone here. Okay, I'm gonna pass to Carla. Hello, Carla.
Hello.
Hello, wanna give a sign that everyone can follow you?
Like this, a finger heart.
Okay, good. Everyone, let's follow Carla's sign. All right, 3, 2, 1, cheese. 3, 2, 1, cheese. All right, everyone, give me a smile. 3, 2, 1, cheese. Yes, good. Everyone, thank you very much, Carla, and everyone as well.
Thank you, Habib and Carla, for the ever cheerful photo session as always. So we have come to the end of our session for today. It has been an amazing session with you guys. I hope that, oh yeah, hi Sarah. Happy Independence Day for Malaysia once again. Please celebrate, it is your day. I would like to say thank you for everyone for making it today. It has been a journey, and I have always been so happy to be involved. Thank you once again for Professor Bates for joining us today. It was an amazing session. It was such an eye opener for me myself as a person who was born in the Sundanese land. For everyone in the room, I would like to wish good luck for the presentation and the discussion that we will have today. Don't worry, the presentation will be randomized if I'm not mistaken. So it will take 2 days for presentation. So we have plenty of time to discuss, to present. So I guess we'll see each other very soon in the WhatsApp group. And I would like to say something in Sundanese. Wait, I need to, I'm very ashamed of myself because I don't remember the saying, but it is a Sundanese saying. Please hold on. Please let me make it. All right, so the saying goes, "Sacangret pageh sagolek pancake." It means that we need to take commitment and be consistent on what we are going to do. So please get ready for the discussion and presentation tomorrow. It has been a very fun journey to serve you today. It's Artist Students MC Boasis Coffee Maker and Life Enjoyer Ariel Yu for your Master of Ceremony today. It's been nice to serve you. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from Bandung, Indonesia. See you soon in the next day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor, for coming.
Thank you, Professor, for the
Keep
session.
safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Everyone, keep safe.
Bye,
Everyone.
guys.
Stay safe.
Everyone. See you tomorrow.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. All right. Thank you very much. Yes, if somebody have any questions, please. We are still opening the meeting for you. Probably until 10:55.